Okay, so this is a little better or different maybe explanation of 10.4 in intermediate algebra. And if you look at the example number 1 on page 624, you'll see that we have x plus 3 squared minus 2 times x plus 3 minus 8 equals 0. Alright, so a quadratic equation, that's just the name of an equation that looks like this. Okay, that's a quadratic equation because look what we've got. We've got an x with a square, an x without a square, and no x at all, and it's equal to 0. That's what makes it a quadratic equation. Doesn't matter what number's in front of here, or what this number is. As long as the x is squared, the x is not squared, the x goes away, and it's equal to 0. Alright, so that's a quadratic equation. Now sometimes we don't have an x there. We have something else that's squared, something else that's not squared, and then nothing here and still equal to 0. That's still a quadratic equation. But instead of the x, it is an x plus 3. Okay, doesn't change that it's a quadratic equation. It just changes what it looks like. Now sometimes, like in example 2, we have 4x to the 4th plus 7x squared equals 2. Alright, so the problem with that is that does not look like a quadratic equation. A 2, a 1, no x. Because we have a 4, a 2, and then it's equal to 2. So what we have to do is take this and make it look like that up there. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite this as 4x to the 4th plus 7x squared, and we're going to move the 2 over, equals 0. So now it's starting to look like this a little bit. We've got our number and it's equal to 0. These things aren't right though, because we have a 2 and a 1, and here we have a 4 and a 2. And this is where the u comes in. Alright? So what I'm going to do in order to make it look like this right here is I'm going to take the middle term and I'm going to say that's u. Okay? So u is equal to x squared. So now, whenever I see an x squared, I'm going to put a u in its place. Alright, first of all, let's look at this, and let's make a little bit of a change here. And instead of a 4x to the 4th power, I'm going to write it as 4x squared squared. Now this is still x to the 4th power. It just looks a little different. So, let's go ahead and write it again. 4x squared squared plus 7x squared minus 2 equals 0. Now, wherever I see an x squared, I'm going to put a u in its place. So there's an x squared right here, and I'm going to put a u in its place. There's an x squared right there, so I'm going to put a u in its place. Okay, so that's all I did. Now I'm going to go ahead and solve this, or factor it, I guess is what I'm doing. And if you remember, when you factor it, when you have a number in front of an x squared or a u squared or anything squared, we take this number times this number, and we get a negative 8. Now, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to factor this into two factors like that. Okay? In order to do that, I take this times this and get negative 8. Now my goal is to find two numbers, multiplied together, give me negative 8, added or subtracted, give me a positive 7. So what are my factors of 8? 8 and 1, 2 and 4. So, is there a way I could get a 7 with 2 and 4? No, 2 plus 4 is 6. Difference between 2 and 4 is 2. But 8 and 1 is 9, but 8 minus 1 is 7. So I can use 8 and 1. Now the question is, when I multiply those, I have to get negative 8. So that means one of these has to be negative. Which one is the negative? Okay, that's the part that gets to be a little confusing, but shouldn't be too bad because the negative is always, or the sign on the largest number is always the sign right there. So since this is a plus, this is a plus. So if that's a plus 8, 8 times what is negative 8? 8 times negative 1. So if this is a positive 8, that has to be a negative 1. Alright, so I'm going to replace, and this is always the way it works, I'm going to replace this with 1u, or I'm sorry, that should be minus 1u, right? Because we said that this here is a minus and this here is a plus. So minus 1u plus 8u minus 2 equals 0. So you see what's going on here? This sign of the largest number between these two will always be this sign. So negative 1 times 8 is negative 8. Negative 1 plus 8 is 7. Notice that I put the positive number as the second number here. If you have a choice, always make this one the positive. Okay, which is 1, 2, 3 numbers in. Always make that positive if you can. It will make your life so much easier. Alright, so notice that this equation is the exact same as this. 4u squared. Negative 1 plus 8 is 7u minus 2. So all we did was we changed what this looked like by multiplying 4 times 2 and getting negative 8, and finding two numbers multiplied together give me negative 8, added give me 7. So we changed what it looked like here. Now we're going to group. Parentheses around the first two numbers. Parentheses around the second two numbers. Make sure you don't put the sign in the parentheses. And now let's see what we've got here. This is what makes it so tricky, isn't it? All this weird stuff going on. Alright, so now I'm just going to look at this and see if I can factor anything out. I have a u I can factor out, and that leaves me with 4u minus 1. In here I can factor out a 2, and I'm left with 4u minus, I took the 2 out of there, but I still have a 1 there. You have to always put a 1 there. Even though you factored that out, there's still a 1 there. And notice this and this are the same. They have to be the same. So we group the numbers outside the parentheses, and we group the numbers inside the parentheses. Okay, so now we have u plus 2 times 4u minus 1 equals 0. Alright, so in the original equation, though, we didn't have any u's, did we? We had x's. In fact, we said that whenever we see an x squared, we were going to put a u in its place. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put the x squared back in where it's supposed to. So since u equals x squared, we're going to put it back to x squared plus 2, because we put it in there for u, and here for x squared minus 1. So all we did was substituted that x squared back in for the u that we took out. And you know, I think I'm going to leave it at that. If you can get that far, we'll just call that good. We're not going to worry about solving for x. Alright, so let's look at one more and see if that helps. Get rid of that. Alright, so let's look at x plus square root of x minus 6. Okay, this middle term again is the key. That x variable is what you're setting u to. Just like when we had 4x, oops, plus 7x squared plus 2 that we had before, we set that equal to u. We're going to do the same thing with the square root of x. We're going to set the square root of x equal to u. It will always be the x term right there. Okay, so let's write it as square root of x is going to be u. Well, if the square root of x is u, then when we square the square root of x, what do we get? We get x. So when we square both of them, we get u squared equals x. And that's what we're going to put right there, because we've got an x there, so we're going to write it as u squared. I know this is really hard to do, isn't it? Alright, now we're going to break it into two binomials. Okay, we've got a u there, a u there. Since there's no number there, we don't have to multiply that number times this -6 and do what we did in the last one. All we have to do is find two numbers, multiplied together, they give me 6, added or subtracted give me 1. Well, when we add 3 and 2, we get 5, but when we subtract, we get 1. And again, there's a plus sign here, so the biggest number gets the plus sign, the little number gets the negative. Now that we've got that done, we can replace our u then with our square root of x. Okay, and now we have it simplified just like we wanted it to. Okay? Okay, so that is 10.4, and then I'll make another video to give you a little bit further instructions on 10.5.